Welcome to a journey through time, where we'll explore the rise and fall of one of history's most misunderstood peoples, the Vandals. Their name has become synonymous with destruction, yet their story is far more complex than the word vandalism suggests. Tonight, let yourself drift as we travel from the misty forests of ancient Scandinavia to the sun-baked shores of North Africa, following a people whose century-long odyssey would reshape the Roman world forever. Our story begins in the cold, dense forests of Scandinavia during the early centuries of the Common Era. Here, among the pine trees and coastal plains of what we now call Sweden and Denmark, lived the ancestors of the Vandals. Archaeological excavations have revealed their early settlements, with distinctive pottery styles and metalwork that would later be found scattered across Europe, marking their incredible migration route like ancient breadcrumbs. The Vandals belonged to the East Germanic branch of peoples, sharing linguistic and cultural ties with the Goths and Burgundians. Their name possibly derives from the Proto-Germanic root meaning to wander, a fitting description for what would become one of history's greatest migrations. In these northern lands, they developed the warrior culture and seafaring skills that would serve them well in the challenges to come. Climate change and population pressure began to push these northern peoples southward. Pollen analysis from ancient bog sites tells us of cooling temperatures and reduced agricultural productivity during the 1st and 2nd centuries CE. The magnetic pull of Roman wealth to the south, combined with displacement by other migrating tribes, set the stage for the great southward movement that would define Vandal history. By the middle of the 1st century CE, the Vandals had established their first major settlements outside Scandinavia and Silesia, along the fertile valleys of the Oder River. Here they encountered Celtic populations and began a fascinating cultural exchange. Vandal longhouses started incorporating Celtic decorative elements, while their metalworkers adopted Celtic techniques for producing stronger, more flexible blades. This wasn't simple conquest, but cultural synthesis through intermarriage, trade, and shared defense. The Vandals weren't a single tribe, but a confederation of related peoples. The Hasdingi, whose name possibly means long-haired ones, controlled northern territories and maintained stronger connections to their Scandinavian roots. The Silingi, named after the Silesia region they came to dominate, occupied southern territories and showed greater Celtic influence in their material culture and settlements. Vandal society reflected the hierarchical organization typical of Germanic peoples, but with distinctive features. At the apex stood the Rakes, warrior kings who combined military leadership with religious authority. Below them ranked the free warriors who formed the backbone of Vandal military power. Archaeological evidence from elite graves reveals significant wealth accumulation, with elaborate weapons, jewelry, and Roman imports demonstrating extensive trade networks with the empire. Their religious practices centered on a polytheistic system shared with other Germanic traditions. Sacred groves, springs, and wooden temples served as ritual sites where they made offerings of weapons and valuables to gods of war and fertility. Weapon deposits found in bog sites often show evidence of ritual destruction, with spears bent and swords broken before deposition as sacrificial offerings. The warrior culture permeated every aspect of Vandal society. Young men underwent initiation rites that transformed them from boys to warriors through ritual combat and oath-taking. Warrior bands formed the core of military organization, living in communal longhouses and participating in drinking ceremonies that reinforced group solidarity. The first recorded conflicts between Vandals and Romans occurred during the 2nd century CE, as tribal pressure along the Danube frontier intensified. The Marcomanni Wars marked the beginning of sustained military interaction, though Vandal participation remains difficult to trace due to Roman tendencies to group various Germanic tribes under collective designations. During the 3rd century, Vandal involvement in frontier conflicts intensified as the Roman Empire faced the crisis of the 3rd century. Archaeological evidence from destroyed Roman settlements includes artifacts consistent with Vandal material culture, suggesting their participation in devastating incursions that penetrated deep into imperial territory. The stability that Vandal communities had enjoyed in Silesia began to crumble during the latter half of the 3rd century as massive population movements swept across the Germanic world. The catalyst came from the east, where Gothic expansion created a domino effect of tribal displacement. The Goths, themselves driven by pressure from steppe nomads, pushed westward into regions previously controlled by other Germanic groups. Archaeological evidence reveals the sudden abandonment of Vandal settlements during this period. At excavation sites, layers of ash and destruction dating to the late 3rd century show broken pottery and scattered metalwork, suggesting hasty evacuation rather than gradual migration. The pressure from Gothic expansion coincided with an even more disruptive force from the Asian steppes. The Huns, a confederation of nomadic peoples skilled in mounted warfare, began moving westward during the 4th century, displacing everyone in their path. Their highly mobile cavalry units proved devastatingly effective against sedentary agricultural societies, creating waves of migration that rippled throughout the Germanic world. Faced with this cascade of displacement, Vandal tribal leaders initiated a process of confederation that would transform their political organization. The two primary groups, the Hasdingi and Silingi, had previously maintained distinct identities. Now they formed an unprecedented alliance that included the Alans, an Iranian-speaking nomadic people who brought crucial cavalry expertise and knowledge of steppe warfare tactics. The Vandal Confederation that emerged was a multi-ethnic coalition capable of challenging Roman military power. Alan mounted archers provided reconnaissance and harassment capabilities, while Germanic warriors maintained their traditional role as heavy infantry. This combination of mobility and staying power allowed them to adapt their tactics to different opponents and terrain conditions. With their confederation established, the Vandals began their westward migration through the Carpathian Basin. This journey took them through Pannonia and Dacia, regions that had experienced Roman occupation but were now largely abandoned. The migration proceeded in stages, with the confederation establishing temporary settlements while scouting routes and gathering intelligence. Archaeological evidence tracks the Vandal migration through distinctive artifact assemblages and settlement patterns. At sites near modern Budapest, excavations reveal systematic dismantling of Roman structures, with useful materials removed for transport while unnecessary elements were left behind, indicating organized occupation rather than random destruction. By late 406 CE, the Vandal Confederation had reached the Rhine frontier, the traditional boundary between the Germanic world and Roman Gaul. Here they encountered other displaced populations, including various Suebi groups driven from their territories by the same pressures. The convergence created a massive concentration of military power that Roman frontier defenses were utterly incapable of containing. The Rhine crossing of December 31st, 406 CE, represented one of the most significant moments in late antique history. Contemporary sources describe the river as frozen solid, allowing the massive barbarian coalition to cross on foot. The crossing involved tens of thousands of people, including warriors, families, livestock, and baggage trains carrying the possessions of entire tribal communities. Roman frontier forces proved incapable of preventing the crossing. The sheer scale of the barbarian coalition overwhelmed defensive preparations designed for much smaller incursions. Archaeological evidence from Roman frontier forts shows hasty abandonment, with valuable equipment left behind as retreating garrisons partially dismantled their own fortifications. The immediate aftermath revealed the true scale of destruction. Archaeological excavations show extensive destruction layers dating to early 407 CE, with burned timber, collapsed masonry, and scattered coins providing evidence of systematic urban destruction. The sack of cities like Mainz demonstrated the Vandals' evolved approach to warfare, combining traditional Germanic assault tactics with siege techniques learned during their migration. The Confederation's military success in Gaul stemmed from their ability to adapt tactics to different opponents. Against heavily fortified cities, they employed formal siege techniques supplemented by cavalry raids that prevented relief forces from arriving. When confronting Roman field armies, they used their mobility advantage to choose favorable battle conditions while avoiding pitched battles against superior numbers. By 409 CE, the Vandals had exhausted immediate opportunities in Gaul while facing increasing pressure from Roman counterattacks and competition from other barbarian groups. The decision to cross the Pyrenees into Hispania represented a calculated strategic choice based on intelligence about conditions in the Iberian Peninsula, where Roman defenses were weaker and resources more abundant. The crossing into Hispania involved careful coordination between the various elements of the barbarian coalition. The division of the peninsula among the Confederates by lot allocated specific regions to each group. The Hasdingi Vandals received Galaetia in the northwest, the Silingi were assigned Boeotia in the south, while the Suebi obtained portions of Galaetia and the Alans received Lusitania and Carthaginensis. This territorial division represented more than simple conquest. It marked the first sustained attempt by Germanic peoples to create functioning kingdoms within former Roman boundaries. The Hasdingi found themselves masters of Galaetia, a mountainous territory with Celtic-influenced populations and established Roman infrastructure. Rather than destroying Roman administrative structures, the Hasdingi chose to occupy and adapt them. The transformation of Roman buildings into Vandal royal residences demonstrates sophisticated understanding of architectural power's symbolic importance. Germanic-style wooden partitions were installed within Roman stone structures, while traditional Vandal decorative elements were incorporated into existing mosaic floors. The Hasdingi approach to legal administration reveals pragmatic flexibility. Roman legal procedures continued for disputes involving the indigenous Hispano-Roman population, while Germanic customary law governed relations within the Vandal community. This dual system required considerable administrative sophistication as royal officials needed to understand both legal traditions. Meanwhile, the Silingi Vandals faced different challenges in Boeotia, the fertile agricultural region centered on the Guadalquivir River Valley. This territory had been one of the wealthiest Roman provinces, supporting large urban centers and extensive villa estates producing olive oil, wine, and grain for export throughout the Mediterranean. The Silingi approach differed significantly from their Hasdingi cousins. Archaeological evidence shows more extensive destruction and rebuilding, with systematic dismantling of Roman defensive works while constructing new fortifications adapted to Germanic military requirements. However, the emergence of Visigothic power in southern Gaul under King William posed an existential threat to the newly established Vandal kingdoms. The Visigoths, serving as foederati under Roman authority, possessed crucial advantages including formal recognition from the imperial government, access to Roman military support, and established supply lines. The first major confrontation occurred in 416 CE when Walia's armies crossed the Pyrenees and began systematic attacks on Silingi positions in Boeotia. The campaign demonstrated Visigothic military superiority achieved through integration with Roman military systems. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites shows the remains of Silingi defensive positions that were systematically reduced through coordinated infantry assault and cavalry exploitation. The destruction of Silingi military power proceeded with devastating efficiency. The Silingi, despite numerical strength and familiarity with local terrain, found themselves unable to concentrate sufficient forces to resist Visigothic advances. The fate of King Fredball and the Silingi leadership remains unclear, though archaeological evidence suggests organized resistance collapsed rapidly. Survivors faced the choice between submission to Visigothic authority or flight to territories controlled by their Hasdingi cousins in Galaetia. Significant numbers chose the latter option, with material culture assemblages from Galaetian sites showing increased diversity, reflecting the incorporation of refugees from Boeotia. The Alans suffered similar devastation, with nomadic Alan military power eliminated even more rapidly than the Silingi. The remnants sought refuge with the Hasdingi Vandals rather than attempting independent resistance. This concentration of surviving barbarian forces in Galaetia under Hasdingi leadership created a formidable military power that proved capable of resisting Visigothic expansion. The maritime expansion that would define Vandal historical significance began during this territorial consolidation. The Atlantic coastline provided access to naval resources and shipbuilding expertise absent during previous continental campaigns. Archaeological excavations at ports like Brigantium reveal evidence of shipbuilding activities marking the beginning of Vandal transformation from land-based confederation into maritime power. The development of Vandal naval capabilities required acquiring technical knowledge from the Hispano-Roman population. The region had maintained maritime connections with Britain and Gaul, providing shipbuilding expertise and navigational knowledge adaptable to military purposes. Ships combined Germanic design elements with Roman naval technology, creating hybrid vessels suited to both coastal raiding and longer-distance expeditions. King Gentheric's death in 428 CE brought his half-brother Genseric to the throne, a ruler whose strategic vision would transform the Vandals from regional power into masters of the Western Mediterranean. Genseric's rise marked a fundamental shift towards centralized authority while eliminating potential rivals within the Confederation's complex leadership structure. The new king's approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of strategic requirements facing the Vandal kingdom. The survivors from destroyed territories had provided additional manpower, but integration required careful management to prevent internal conflicts. Genseric implemented systematic reorganization, distributing former Silingi and Alan warriors throughout existing Hasdingi units, creating mixed formations that combined different tactical traditions while ensuring loyalty. Genseric's strategic assessment revealed both opportunities and constraints. Galicia's mountainous terrain provided excellent defense against land attacks, but limited agricultural capacity could not indefinitely support the large concentrated population. Visigothic presence blocked territorial expansion within Hispania, while Roman naval power limited profitable raiding. Intelligence networks provided crucial information about unprecedented opportunities for territorial expansion. Roman North Africa, the wealthy province supplying grain to feed Rome's population, had become embroiled in complex civil conflict, weakening imperial defenses. The revolt of Bonifacius, the Comes Africi, who controlled regional military forces, had created openings a skilled opportunist might exploit. The decision to invade Roman Africa represented calculated strategic gamble based on careful analysis of military capabilities, logistical requirements, and potential rewards. Unlike earlier migrations driven by external pressure and immediate survival needs, the African expedition reflected deliberate planning designed to achieve specific political and economic objectives. The crossing of the Strait of Gibraltar in May 429 CE involved approximately 80,000 people, representing one of the largest barbarian migrations in recorded history. This massive movement included Vandal and Alan warriors plus their families, dependents, and accumulated possessions of entire tribal communities. The logistical complexity required unprecedented organizational capabilities. The fleet consisted of hundreds of vessels ranging from large transport ships capable of carrying entire family groups with livestock to smaller craft designed for reconnaissance and coastal operations. These ships incorporated design elements from multiple traditions, creating hybrid designs optimized for the African expedition's specific requirements. Landing sites were chosen through careful reconnaissance, taking advantage of weaknesses in Roman coastal defenses. The Vandals avoided heavily fortified ports, instead selecting smaller harbors and beach sites that could accommodate their large fleet while minimizing immediate Roman counterattack risk. The immediate Roman response demonstrated imperial defense weakness and the extent to which civil conflict had disrupted normal military operations. Local garrison forces, already stretched thin by ongoing revolt, proved incapable of mounting effective resistance against the massive barbarian invasion force. Panic spread among Roman administrators and civilians as news of the landing reached throughout the province. The systematic conquest of Roman North Africa proceeded with remarkable efficiency. The Confederation's military organization, refined through decades of migration and warfare, proved ideally suited to rapid territorial expansion requirements across the North African coastal plain. Vandal cavalry provided reconnaissance and rapid strike capabilities, while Germanic infantry proved effective in siege operations and field battles. The siege of Hippo Regius in 430 CE marked a crucial test of Vandal capabilities against a major Roman fortified position. This city served as an important administrative and commercial center with substantial defensive works and reinforced garrison. The siege demonstrated sophisticated techniques, combining traditional Germanic assault methods with Roman engineering principles and captured equipment. The death of Augustine of Hippo during the siege in August 430 CE provided symbolic significance extending far beyond immediate military importance. Augustine, whose theological writings had profoundly influenced Christian thought, spent his final months organizing his city's spiritual defense while Vandal forces tightened siege lines. His death symbolized the broader transformation as barbarian kingdoms replaced imperial administration. The fall of Hippo Regius after over a year demonstrated both Vandal persistence and ultimate Roman defensive weakness. The city's capture provided the Confederation with a major port facility and substantial military equipment, supplies, and treasure. Archaeological evidence shows systematic Vandal reorganization of infrastructure with Roman administrative buildings converted to barbarian purposes while maintaining essential commercial and manufacturing facilities. The Vandal approach to governing conquered territories reflected lessons from earlier Hispanian experiences, adapted to different North African conditions and opportunities. Unlike mountainous Galician terrain favoring defensive strategies, coastal plains offered extensive conquest opportunities while providing access to wealthy trade networks connecting the Mediterranean world. The systematic exploitation of Roman administrative infrastructure allowed maintaining effective control over rapidly expanding territories while preserving economic systems, making the region valuable. Archaeological evidence shows continued use of Roman record-keeping systems, legal procedures, and taxation methods, though under barbarian supervision modified to serve Vandal political priorities. The capture of Carthage in 439 CE represented the culmination of systematic conquest, transforming the Vandals from Hispanian refugees into masters of one of the Mediterranean's most strategically important regions. The ancient city possessed symbolic significance extending far beyond immediate military and economic value, marking a fundamental shift in Western Mediterranean power balance. The administrative challenge required unprecedented organizational sophistication. Genseric inherited not only Carthage's physical infrastructure, but complex bureaucratic systems evolved over centuries to manage tax collection, justice administration, and military coordination across diverse North African territories. Rather than dismantling Roman institutions, the Vandal king demonstrated remarkable pragmatism by adapting them to serve his political objectives while preserving essential functions. The fusion of Germanic and Roman administrative traditions created a unique governmental system reflecting the kingdom's multicultural nature. Traditional Vandal royal authority remained paramount, with Genseric exercising personal control over major decisions and military appointments. However, day-to-day administration relied heavily on Roman bureaucratic procedures, legal frameworks, and record-keeping systems proven effective over imperial centuries. The religious policies implemented by Genseric represented one of the most controversial aspects of Vandal rule. The Vandals had converted to Arian Christianity during their Danubian migration, adopting theological positions denying Christ's full divinity and rejecting Trinitarian doctrine established as orthodox at the Council of Nicaea. This religious commitment became intertwined with Vandal ethnic identity and political independence. The promotion of Arian Christianity served multiple political functions. It provided unifying ideology for diverse Germanic and Allan populations comprising the Confederation, creating shared religious practices transcending traditional tribal boundaries. The distinctive theological positions also differentiated Vandal religious identity from the Roman Empire, reinforcing political independence while justifying resistance to imperial authority. The systematic persecution of Nicene Christians reflected both theological conviction and practical political calculation. North African provinces had been Orthodox Christianity strongholds with powerful bishops and extensive ecclesiastical properties representing potential resistance centers. By attacking the Nicene Church's organizational structure, Genseric simultaneously advanced religious objectives and eliminated potential political opposition. The development of Vandal naval supremacy proceeded simultaneously with internal administrative and religious developments, transforming the kingdom from land-based power into the dominant Western Mediterranean maritime force. Carthage's capture provided infrastructure necessary for major naval expansion, but realizing this potential required systematic development of shipbuilding capabilities, naval personnel training, and supply base establishment. Carthage's shipyards underwent massive expansion under Vandal direction, with archaeological evidence revealing new building slip construction, existing facility expansion, and specialized workshop establishment for naval equipment production. These facilities combined Roman naval architecture with Germanic craftsmanship and innovations developed through practical maritime operations experience. Vandal warship design incorporated elements from multiple maritime traditions, creating vessels optimized for Mediterranean raiding and naval combat-specific requirements. Archaeological evidence from shipwreck sites includes vessels with construction characteristics suggesting Vandal origin, featuring reinforced hulls capable of withstanding rough seas, modified rigging systems allowing rapid combat maneuvering, and specialized storage compartments designed for extended raiding expeditions. The strategic deployment of Vandal naval forces focused on establishing control over key islands and sea routes, maximizing the kingdom's ability to disrupt Roman commerce while protecting territorial interests. Sardinia's conquest provided forward base for operations against the Italian mainland, while Corsica control secured sea routes connecting North Africa with southern Gaul and Hispania. The culmination of Vandal naval development came with the audacious raid on Rome itself in 455 CE, demonstrating both the strategic reach of Genseric's forces and sophisticated planning capabilities characterizing Vandal military operations. The political circumstances making this raid possible reflected continuing Western Roman Empire weakness, devastated by internal conflicts, barbarian invasions, and economic collapse. Emperor Valentinian III's assassination in March 455 CE created a succession crisis, providing Genseric with the opportunity he'd been seeking to strike directly at Roman power's heart. The new emperor, Petronius Maximus, lacked popular support and adequate military resources for defending against major Vandal assault. Contemporary sources suggest Genseric may have received intelligence about Roman weakness from imperial court contacts, allowing him to time his attack for maximum strategic effect. The Vandal fleet sailing from Carthage toward Rome represented the culmination of decades of naval development and military preparation. The expedition involved hundreds of ships carrying thousands of warriors plus specialized equipment necessary for conducting siege operations against heavily fortified positions. The fleet's composition reflected diverse maritime capabilities the Vandals had developed, including large transport vessels, smaller warships for reconnaissance and combat, and specialized craft designed for river operations. The approach via the Tiber River demonstrated sophisticated understanding of geographical and strategic factors determining operational success. The Vandals avoided direct assault on Rome's massive walls by using naval mobility to bypass land-based defenses and approach from an unexpected direction. This tactical innovation reflected unique advantages naval power provided, allowing military force projection across vast distances while avoiding prolonged siege operations. The systematic but restrained sack that followed revealed Genseric's strategic sophistication and political acumen. Unlike earlier barbarian sacks involving widespread destruction and random violence, Vandal occupation proceeded according to carefully planned objectives, maximizing valuable resource acquisition while minimizing unnecessary infrastructure and population damage. The selection of systematic looting targets reflected detailed intelligence about Rome's most valuable treasures and strategic resources location. The Vandals focused on imperial palaces, major churches, and wealthy residential districts where centuries of accumulated wealth had been concentrated. Archaeological evidence shows selective valuable item removal rather than comprehensive destruction, indicating the Vandals possessed specific knowledge about what they sought and where to find it. The removal of imperial treasures provided the Vandal kingdom with unprecedented wealth financing, further military expansion, and administrative development. The captured gold, silver, and precious objects represented not only immediate economic value, but symbolic significance, enhancing Genseric's prestige throughout the Mediterranean world. The systematic transportation of these treasures back to Carthage required careful planning and substantial logistical capabilities. The capture of prominent Roman hostages, including imperial family members, provided Genseric with valuable diplomatic leverage exploitable in subsequent Roman authority negotiations. These hostages served multiple strategic functions, providing security against Roman retaliation while creating opportunities for political manipulation of imperial succession disputes. The establishment of Vandal control over the central Mediterranean transformed the late Roman world's political landscape in ways extending far beyond military conquest. Genseric's kingdom now controlled sea lanes connecting the empire's eastern and western portions, while his fleets threatened Roman territories from Hispania to Egypt. This strategic position compelled both Western and Eastern Roman empires to engage in complex diplomatic negotiations unthinkable when Germanic tribes were viewed primarily as barbarian threats. The death of Genseric in January 477 CE marked the beginning of gradual but inexorable decline in Vandal power, culminating in the kingdom's destruction 56 years later. The succession system the Great King had established, designed to prevent civil wars through predetermined inheritance rules, instead created a series of weak rulers lacking both personal authority and strategic vision necessary to maintain the complex political structure Genseric had constructed. Huneric inherited vast territories, substantial military forces, and accumulated wealth, but the very success of his predecessor's conquests had created administrative and military challenges exceeding his successor's capabilities. The predetermined succession created situations where royal authority depended on legal precedent rather than personal charisma and proven leadership ability. Court factions emerging during Huneric's reign reflected complex ethnic and religious divisions developed within the Vandal kingdom during expansion and consolidation. Original Hasdingi nobility maintained positions as royal support corps, but their influence was increasingly challenged by new elements. Silingi survivors retained distinct identities and political interests, while Alan nobles advocated for policies reflecting nomadic traditions and cavalry-focused military perspectives. The military establishment faced internal divisions reflecting the diverse origins and experiences of various groups comprising Vandal armed forces. Traditional Germanic warrior bands maintained emphasis on personal loyalty and individual combat prowess, but territorial control requirements and naval operations had necessitated more professional military unit development with standardized equipment and systematic training. The decline in military effectiveness became apparent during later Huneric reign years as various enemies began testing Vandal defenses with increasing boldness. Moorish tribes of the North African interior began launching more frequent and successful raids against settled territories, revealing weaknesses in the kingdom's defensive arrangements. The first major Moorish success occurred in 483 CE when tribal forces under Chief Mastides launched coordinated assault on Vandal positions in the Ouras Mountains. The attack demonstrated sophisticated tactical planning combining traditional Moorish mobility with knowledge of Vandal defensive arrangements gained through reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. The Byzantine Empire's growing interest in North African affairs created additional pressure on the declining Vandal kingdom. Emperor Zeno's diplomatic initiatives during the 480s revealed Byzantine recognition that Vandal weakness presented opportunities for imperial expansion absent during Genseric's reign. Intelligence networks Constantinople maintained provided detailed information about internal Vandal conflicts and military failures. The economic foundations began deteriorating as military weakness undermined commercial relationships and tribute arrangements, generating substantial revenues during the expansion period. Disruption of trade routes by Moorish raids and Byzantine naval activities reduced profits available from commercial taxation, while defensive force maintenance costs against multiple enemies strained the kingdom's financial resources. Guthmund's succession in 484 CE brought temporary hope for royal recovery, but the new king faced challenges that had only intensified. Court factions had become more entrenched and hostile to royal authority, while external enemies had gained confidence and capability through earlier successes. Religious policies implemented by Guthmund represented significant departure from systematic persecution characterizing earlier Vandal rule. The new king recognized continued oppression of the Orthodox Christian majority was generating internal resistance, weakening the kingdom's ability to confront external threats. The reign of Thrasimund, succeeding Guthmund in 496 CE, marked the final phase of independent Vandal rule before ultimate collapse. Thrasimund possessed greater personal ability than immediate predecessors, and demonstrated sophisticated understanding of strategic challenges, but structural weaknesses developed over 2 decades proved too extensive for any individual ruler to overcome. The succession crisis following Thrasymun's death in 523 CE revealed complete breakdown of the political system Genseric had established. Predetermined succession rules designed to prevent civil wars instead created situations where multiple claimants possessed theoretical legitimacy while lacking practical support. Hilderic's eventual succession represented compromise between factional interests rather than clear resolution, leaving the new king with limited authority facing immediate legitimacy challenges. Hilderic's religious reconciliation attempts marked final efforts to restore internal stability through accommodation of the kingdom's diverse populations. Catholic bishop restoration and confiscated church property returns represented dramatic reversals of policies defining Vandal rule for nearly a century. These religious reforms generated intense opposition from the Arian establishment and traditional Germanic nobles, viewing such changes as fundamental Vandal principle betrayals. Resulting factional conflicts created open warfare within the kingdom, with different groups controlling separate territories and maintaining independent military forces. The Byzantine preparations for North African reconquest proceeded systematically as Emperor Justinian recognized Vandal internal conflicts presented unprecedented opportunity for imperial restoration. Intelligence networks Constantinople maintained provided detailed information about Vandal military capabilities and political divisions, allowing Byzantine planners to develop comprehensive strategies. The intelligence reports reaching Constantinople in early 533 CE painted pictures of Vandal weakness exceeding even optimistic Byzantine assessments. Justinian's spy networks provided detailed accounts of civil war raging between Hilderic supporters and forces loyal to Gelimer, who had seized the throne in military coup the previous year. Emperor Justinian's decision to launch reconquest represented years of strategic planning culmination begun during Thrasymun's later reign stages. The emperor's advisors had systematically analyzed Vandal military capabilities, identifying specific defensive arrangement weaknesses while developing tactical approaches designed to exploit these vulnerabilities. The selection of Belisarius as African expedition commander reflected careful consideration of specific requirements for conducting operations against the Vandal kingdom. The young general had demonstrated exceptional tactical flexibility during Persian campaigns, showing particular skill in adapting Byzantine military methods to counter unconventional enemies. The army assembled for the African campaign represented the finest military force the Eastern Roman Empire had fielded in generations. The corps consisted of approximately 15,000 regular troops drawn from Scolae Palatini and other elite units, supplemented by substantial numbers of federati and allied contingents, bringing the total force to nearly 18,000 men. The departure of this massive force from Constantinople in June 533 CE represented one of the largest military expeditions launched by the Eastern Roman Empire since Heraclius's Persian campaigns. The logistical coordination required to transport nearly 20,000 men with equipment, supplies, and animals across the Mediterranean demonstrated administrative capabilities developed through centuries of imperial experience. The initial landing at Caput Veda, approximately 150 miles south of Carthage, caught Vandal forces completely unprepared for the Byzantine assault's scale and coordination. Gelimer had concentrated available troops for operations against internal enemies, leaving the coastline defended by scattered garrison units incapable of mounting effective resistance against Belisarius's professional army. The Battle of Ad Decimum, fought on September 13, 533 CE, revealed the extent to which Vandal military capabilities had deteriorated since Genseric's conquest days. Gelimer's forces, hastily assembled from various garrison units and tribal contingents, lacked coordination and tactical flexibility characterizing earlier Vandal armies. Belisarius deployed forces according to proven tactical principles, maximizing professional training and standardized equipment advantages. Byzantine cavalry formed the formation center with heavy cataphracts positioned to deliver decisive charges, while mounted archers provided covering fire and enemy formation harassment. The decisive moment came when Belisarius personally led a cavalry charge shattering the Vandal formation center. The Byzantine general's tactical timing proved perfect as his attack coincided with Vandal morale collapse following several prominent nobles' deaths in earlier fighting. The combination of heavy cavalry impact and psychological effects of seeing leaders fall created panic spreading rapidly throughout the Vandal army. Gelimer's decision to abandon Carthage rather than attempting siege defense revealed his recognition that Vandal military power had been effectively destroyed in the single battle. The king's capital evacuation proceeded in such haste that substantial quantities of royal treasure and military equipment were left behind, providing Belisarius with valuable resources while demonstrating the completeness of Vandal collapse. The Byzantine entry into Carthage on September 15, 533 CE, marked the end of nearly a century of Vandal rule in North Africa. The city's population, having suffered under decades of Arian persecution and Germanic exploitation, welcomed imperial forces as liberators rather than conquerors. Contemporary sources describe street celebrations as Orthodox Christian churches reopened and exiled bishops returned to their sees. The Battle of Tricameron, fought in December 533 CE, eliminated the last organized Vandal resistance under Gelimer's leadership. The king had managed to assemble approximately 5,000 warriors from scattered tribal groups and loyal garrison units. But this force lacked training, equipment, and coordination necessary to challenge Belisarius's professional army. The capture of Gelimer's family and treasury during the pursuit eliminated any possibility of continued Vandal resistance. The king himself managed to escape to mountainous interior regions where he sought refuge among Moorish tribes maintaining independence throughout Germanic rule. However, his isolation from remaining Vandal society elements and lack of resources for maintaining military operations made continued resistance impossible. The surrender of Gelimer in March 534 CE marked the formal end of the Vandal kingdom and completion of Byzantine reconquest. The former king's decision to capitulate rather than face starvation death reflected his recognition that continued resistance would serve no purpose beyond prolonging his remaining followers' suffering. The fate of the Vandal population following Byzantine conquest completion varied considerably depending on social status and collaboration degree with the former Germanic regime. Royal family and prominent nobles were transported to Constantinople, where they were displayed in Justinian's triumph before being provided with Anatolian estates. The integration of former Vandal territories into Byzantine administrative systems proceeded according to established imperial procedures refined through centuries of experience governing diverse populations. The Africa prefecture was re-established with its capital at Carthage, while the complex of fortifications and administrative centers serving Germanic rule were adapted to serve imperial requirements. The gradual disappearance of Vandal identity over subsequent generations reflected both systematic Byzantine integration policies and fundamental changes occurring within Germanic society during the North African rule century. The Romanization transforming Vandal elite culture during their political dominance period facilitated their absorption into imperial society, while religious conversion from Arianism to Orthodox Christianity eliminated one of the primary Germanic distinctiveness markers. By the late 6th century, virtually no trace of Vandal cultural influence remained visible in North African society's material record. The historical legacy of the Vandal kingdom extended far beyond their century of political dominance. Their success in establishing a functioning barbarian state within former Roman territories provided a model influencing other Germanic kingdom development throughout Western Europe. The transformation of Mediterranean political landscape resulting from Vandal naval supremacy had permanent consequences outlasting their kingdom's destruction. The development of barbarian maritime capabilities demonstrated Germanic peoples could master complex technologies and organizational methods necessary for projecting power across vast distances, fundamentally altering Roman assumptions about barbarian limitations. And so ends the remarkable story of the Vandals, a people whose name became synonymous with destruction, but whose legacy was far more complex. From the forests of Scandinavia to the halls of Carthage, from tribal confederation to maritime empire, they carved their mark across a century of history before disappearing into the broader tapestry of the Mediterranean world. In their rise and fall, we see reflected the great transformation of the ancient world itself, as the old Roman order gave way to the new realities of a changing Europe. Sleep well, and dream of their long journey across time and space.